I got the most Democrat and the most Republican 2 people I could find. These are them. And today, I'm gonna be scanning their brains.
And this is Frank, a political scientist who's going to be looking at both of their brain scans and seeing if he can guess which is the Democrat and which is the Republican, just using their brains.
First, meet participant 1.
Hi, I'm participant 1. I'm 22 years old and originally from North Dakota.
And for our second scan, meet participant 2.
Hello, I'm participant 2, and I'm 19 years old, and I'm from LA.
One of them is a Democrat and one is a Republican, and Frank will be using only their brains to tell which is which. Frank will be waiting in this holding room while the 2 participants get scanned, and he'll see the results at the end. Now, participant 1 is going in the MRI, which is really just a giant magnetic brain scanner.
So the reason we chose Frank to do this is that in 2017, he worked on a study that showed the neurological differences between Democrat and Republican brains. So he should be an expert on telling the difference.
So this is just an illustration. We would normally have a lot of people. The idea here is that we have 2 extreme people on either side. Hopefully they represent the averages, but that might not necessarily be the case.
I'm so curious if Frank's gonna be able to guess correctly. This is crazy.
What I'm going to be using to make my guess today is the corticolimbic system, which is a pathway in the brain where there's an area called the amygdala, which is this kind of almond or walnut-sized part of the brain. And when the amygdala is larger, for example, we should expect that people have stronger emotional reactions to emotional stimuli in their environment, like threats or disgust.
This is where scan 1, the MRI, will come in.
So can you tell me, specifically looking at the amygdala, I know that's one of the main parts that Frank is looking at. Do you think she has an above average size amygdala or an average size or below average size?
Compared to a young person of her age, because the amygdala does change as you age over time. So let's go right down the plane. So to me, her amygdala looked generous, generous for a person.
So a little bigger than average?
I would say possibly.
Okay.
It's hard to say, like I said, because we see a wide range of people. And the amygdala is sort of like a jelly roll. It's rolled up onto itself at the head of the hippocampus here. So the size of it is really a volume displacement.
So as far as scan 1, the MRI, participant 1's amygdala was a bit big. There's also one other part of the brain that Frank is going to be looking at.
So what the amygdala is connected to, that we're looking at here, is the anterior cingulate cortex, also called the ACC. So when we're looking at the ACC, what we would generally expect is that somebody with a larger ACC or a more active ACC is going to have a stronger reaction to if they're seeing something and then something happens that they didn't expect. Whereas somebody with a smaller ACC or less active is going to have less of a reaction if something unexpected happens.
Can we look at her anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC, and how do you think that size compares to normal?
I'd say normal, possibly maybe a little bit larger.
And their ACC was also a bit big. Interesting. I wanted to check in with participant 2, who was almost up to see how he was feeling.
Do you think that the professor is going to be able to guess correctly your political beliefs just off your brain scan?
I would say so, yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I think I have pretty strong opinions on the issues I've been talking about for years, so the professor is going to look at my brain versus the other participant, and I think there's going to be a difference.
Okay, now it is participant 2's turn. Okay, cool. So now we're looking at that first scan.
So these are the subregions of the brain. Again, we're looking at the hippocampus along here. The head of the hippocampus is the amygdala. So this is sub 1 again. We're back to the very first person that we imaged. And I'm going to just do the same thing where we'll slice down that subregion of the brain. Okay, so here's a really great shot of the amygdala. Those are quite generous. Yeah, I don't know. Those are really...
So his is pretty big.
Pretty thick.
How do you think it compares to the other one?
But it may be thicker. This may be actually thicker.
So his is a little bit bigger. Interesting. What about his ACC?
Let's see, that one is, again, it looks maybe a little small, but I don't know, it's hard to say.
So this participant's amygdala was even bigger and their ACC was smaller. Before we got participant 1 and participant 2 out of the scanners, we had them each do a second scan, called an fMRI. An fMRI scan measures brain activity. For that scan, we're gonna have a screen in the machine with them. The participants will see hypothetical political candidates in their party, and 10 position stances that would make sense for someone in that party to have, and 5 that don't. For example, the Republican may see that this hypothetical person in their party supports universal health care. The participants are then going to just think about how they feel about these stances, and those thoughts will also help Frank tell who's who. One of the parties in his studies tended to have more activity in their ACC when they would see the incongruent policy statements from the hypothetical candidates in their party, meaning the statements that don't make sense. This means they had some sort of an internal want to follow their party's lines a little closer, or at least that's what the study found. So the fMRI, showing brain activity specifically in the ACC, where your reaction to social norms is governed, should also give Frank insight into which person belongs to which party.
It's impossible to communicate with participant 1 while she's in there unless we use these mics. She can't hear us, or can she hear us?
Not at all.
Yeah, she can't hear us right now, but she's currently looking at these political policy positions and still just thinking about how she feels about them.
There was obviously a lot of activity with the incongruent statements, but we would need to wait for the next participant to compare in order to get clear results.
Can you already start to look at the results?
I just have this really quick preliminary. It's only 1.5 millimeter resolution,
Yeah.
isotropic, so it's pretty poor quality.
So would you want to wait to look at
Yeah,
things
we
like
need to
that?
say we need to wait another 2.5 minutes or so.
All good. While we're waiting, I want to tell you guys about ground news. Regardless of if you're Democrat or Republican, you want to be getting the full picture when you receive your news. And with ground news, you get just that.
Ground News is a website and an app on a mission to give readers a more data-driven and objective way to read the news. They gather different articles on a story into one place, so you can get a comprehensive story overview. Every story comes with a visual breakdown of the political bias, reliability, and ownership, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. For example, this story about the Trump versus Harris debate has more than 750 sources reporting on it, with 43% of the reporting coming from the left and 23% from the right.
And you can see how the headlines differ, with the left-leaning ones talking about how Harris challenged Trump, and the right-leaning ones mentioning a CNN poll that shows Trump doing better than you would expect.
Ground News also has an amazing blind spot feed that shows stories heavily covered by one side of the political spectrum while being ignored by the other. This way, you can clearly see what your side might be missing. And one feature you've got to check out, especially during this time, is their 2024 elections page. It gives you a complete view of the election coverage, showing how different outlets cover each candidate, and even pointing out election-focused blind spots. If you want to see through media bias in this election cycle, I highly recommend you check this out. With Ground News, you know exactly where you're getting your news from and who's the real source saying it.
So you can scan this QR code or go to ground.news/Gordon for 40% off the same Vantage plan I use for the most unbiased news. And thanks again to Ground News for sponsoring this video.
So once participant 2's fMRI was complete, we got him out of the scanner. He also showed a lot of activity to the incongruent statements, but it would be up to Frank to decide who showed more.
Let's see if Frank can actually decipher political parties from this.
Hello, yes, I am ready.
All right, let's do it. Come with me.
So basically what we know, so what we think is that having a larger amygdala, which is, in other words, like more gray matter volume in the amygdala, is associated with right-of-center politics, whereas more liberal or democratic people, it's associated with more volume in the anterior cingulate, or also called the ACC. Okay, and this is who? This is the first or
Second person.
This is the second person. Okay.
Let's see if we look at the first person here.
It seems fuller here, right? Definitely. That's the first person. And then for amygdala,
This one, let's see if we come out to the side. I kind of see, I'm trying to get that perfect image. So like this thin area right here, so on that, you can see how it's not folded over.
and this is first participant still? Yeah, so it seems like maybe, so this would, so there is more, potentially, more ACC in the first participant, more amygdala in the second participant.
Looks like I think we could measure that.
But now it's time to look at scan 2, the fMRI.
So here's the function of the first person. I really didn't get much. I just see like one little area there.
Oh, wow. That's the first person.
That's the first person.
Okay.
But the second one seems to be really loaded with a lot of activity. But
Oh,
I
wow.
really can't explain. There's a little bit of movement in this. I'd like
And
you
this
to
is
do
the
it
contrast
analysis.
from the incongruent to congruent,
Exactly.
right?
So that's all I was measuring.
So can you explain what the congruence piece actually means?
Yeah, so what we found in previous research was that Democrats had more ACC activity in responding to the incongruent trials, whereas Republicans still did that, but just to a lesser degree.
So for whatever reason, Republicans tended to almost care more or less about the party lines? It seems like less.
But yeah, and you know, I don't know if care. We don't know what it means with the ACC.
But they would have less blood flow in their brain. Yeah.
So if I were going solely on the functional scans, I would probably guess that participant 2 was the Democrat. But I thought about it, and if I just know that there's been more data and more research on the structural differences.
Yeah.
And so if I had to guess, I would probably weigh that more, and I'd probably say participant 1 is the Democrat and participant 2 is the Republican. Okay. Yes.
Okay, do you think you've made your decision?
I do think I've made my decision, yeah.
Okay, I'm very excited to see if you are correct. I mean, I know if you're correct, but we'll find out.
I'm ready, yeah.
All right.
I'm confident.
Let's do it. Let's do this.
So I think participant 1 is the Democrat, and I think participant 2 is the Republican.
Okay, participant 1, please enter the room.
All right! Yes! The science is real.
And participant 2, you can also come in.
Nice to meet you guys.
I'm so glad that worked. Oh my goodness.
I will reiterate that there are people that don't line up with the findings sometimes. This was sort of what we would expect, exactly. So thank you for having brains like that. We appreciate it.